What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, February 1st, 2019. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Claire's going to be with us in hour number 3 here. So let's just get cracking and right on into it here. Looking over at the war zones here, the U.S. Army has come out with its report analyzing the war in Iraq. And basically they've concluded that the only victor in the 8-year campaign against Saddam Hussein, to replace him with a puppet ruler, that the only one who actually won was Iran, because they smashed Iraq as a regional political power, and that left Iran virtually unchallenged except for Israel. So it's a case of unintended consequences and not thinking these things all the way through. But of course, as you know, there is this huge push. Oh, we've got to go after Iran now. We've got to go after Iran. They're doing bad things. They're building stink bombs in their basements and so forth, and trying to get that going here. So, but that's the U.S. Army's opinion here. Getting on down to Venezuela, things are still hot down there. Nicolas Maduro actually videoed a message to the American people with subtitles. It's on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, basically saying that we need to basically tell our government we're not really interested in yet another war, and I don't think we really are. You know, he's basically appealing to the American people to try and stop this thing before it goes any further. Yesterday, there was that CNN story about these Venezuelan army defectors. And I pointed out on the show, the patches on the uniforms were wrong, and that therefore CNN was engaging in more fakery. And so now we have the story that's coming out of Russia today, basically confirming the observation. They're saying these Venezuelan army defectors were not in the army. They were not defectors. They don't even live in Venezuela. They may be former Venezuelan military, but basically the patches on their uniforms were discontinued back in 2008. So these Venezuelan army defectors asking for U.S. weapons to overthrow Maduro, they're not who they say they are. And we probably shouldn't be giving them guns. But it's just more of CNN's fakery and hoax, and all the corporate media is on board. Oh yes, we've got to go into Venezuela now. We've got to go into Nicaragua. We've got to go into Cuba. It's about time we gave Cuba what for. It's been 60 years since the Bay of Pigs, and you know, by golly, you know, it's time for us to be avenged for our horrific defeat at the Bay of Pigs. And thus it goes. I mean, there's more and more talk about how Venezuela is just the beginning of a plan to remake Latin America, to kick out Russia and China, to turn South America back into a U.S. colony. Oh my goodness, it just goes on and on and on and on. Right now, the United States is mulling sanctions against Turkey over their trade with Venezuela. You know, it's starting to remind me of when Oprah Winfrey gave all those cars away on her show. You know, it's you get a sanction, and you get a sanction, and you get a sanction. And it really is getting rather silly. And again, all the countries that are being sanctioned, they're moving to find ways to evade the sanctions. They're moving away from the U.S. sphere of economic influence. And it's really, it's a bad policy. And apparently U.S. officials are looking at whether Turkey's trade in Venezuelan gold represents a violation of sanctions imposed by the U.S. against Venezuela last November. So anyway, over in Italy, their deputy foreign minister is speaking out against what's going on in Venezuela. And apparently Italy does not recognize Venezuela's opposition leader Juan Guaido as its interim president, saying that a Libya-style regime change must be avoided. And he added the kind of regime change that failed in Libya must not be attempted, as it turned out to be a mistake that everyone recognizes today, and it certainly was here. He says we must prevent this from happening in Venezuela. Yeah, it would be a good idea. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to know who's really in charge of things here in the United States of America. I mean, you've got all the intelligence agencies that are saying that Iran is not building nuclear weapons, that probably more military adventures are ill-advised at this time given our state of preparedness. And then you have Trump coming on out and say they need to go back to school. You know, who's got his ear? Who's the one pushing forward? John Bolton, probably more than anybody else. But John Bolton doesn't have to pay for these wars, and he doesn't have to fight them. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, there's an interesting little video, and I'm using the word interesting very carefully. It's of an American F-15, and the video, and we've got it linked to whatreallyhappened.com. It shows the F-15 flying along, and then all of a sudden a Sukhoi 27 fighter basically shows up and banks into the F-15, forcing the F-15 to veer off. And it's a really cool video, but on the other hand, it's sort of showing how tense things are getting up there. And I don't think it was a good idea for the Russians to do that. It's just increasing the tensions to the point where somebody's going to pull a trigger. And things are really going to be, you know, getting tense, as it were, if you will. Apparently, over in the United Arab Emirates, they have an intelligence unit which was spying on dissidents. They've been recruiting American former spies to monitor their own citizens, and apparently they were asked to spy on U.S. citizens as part of an operation called Project Raven. And the story's been revealed by multiple Americans who were part of the operation who admitted to spying on enemies of the UAE monarchy, including journalists, activists, and foreign governments, but who only had qualms about what they were doing when they were asked to monitor fellow Americans. Well, at least they had the qualms at that point. I have to wonder what kind of a mindset it takes to be a snitch, to be a spook, to spy on people here. All right, turning over to Venezuela again here. People are starting to really look at Elliott Abrams. Donald Trump has picked him to supposedly bring democracy to Venezuela. But Abrams has spent his life crushing democracies. He did it in El Salvador. This is his pattern. He doesn't bring democracy, he brings dictatorship and puppet rule. And that's what they want to do to Venezuela, and apparently Nicaragua, and apparently Cuba. And I can't see them going in and doing all three of those nations. First of all, we really don't have the resources. Second of all, at some point, Russia and China and the rest of the world are going to say, okay, this has gone on far enough. We're not going to go back to a world that is ruled by the United States of America militarily. We're going to be in another war here. Over in Syria, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, formerly Jabhat al-Nusra, formerly blah, 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 formerly blah, 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 blah. They keep changing their name all over the place. They've blocked all the roads linking the Idlib de-escalation zone with the northern Aleppo countryside, including the Turkish-occupied area of Afrin. The two main blocked roads were Atme Dir Balut and Dir Saman al-Ghazawiya. Say that one 3 times fast. Therefore, the transportation of goods and other traffic are now under direct control of the group, which is charging funds for passage of its checkpoints. Now, the formal justification of the move is the alleged threat of ISIS infiltration, which Hayat Tahrir al-Sham seeks to prevent. On the other hand, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham move undermines... All right. The Senate yesterday voted 68 to 23 to pass a resolution from Majority Leader Mitch McConnell expressing opposition to President Trump's plan to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria, describing it as basically precipitous, and also the plan to withdraw troops from Afghanistan. And says withdrawing the troops poses a serious risk. Now, this is a non-binding vote. This is simply expressing the sentiment of the Congress. Of course, it wouldn't be a law without Trump's signature. He's not going to sign this one here. But apparently, the non-binding resolution was passed with overwhelming support from the Republican majority, setting them squarely against parts of President Trump's foreign policy. Now, a number of Democrats who voted against it expressed concern that it was tantamount to a vote advocating a state of permanent war, which, yeah, look how long we've been in Afghanistan, 18 years. Look how long we've been in Iraq, 15 years. Remember the project for the New American Century back in the 1990s, they were advocating for 100 years of war to bring the world under the control of the United States. In Afghanistan, we're almost a fifth of the way there. It's pretty scary here. Now, Rand Paul has come on out saying that this calling a withdrawal from Afghanistan and Syria precipitous is ludicrous. And he said it was ludicrous for Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to call taking troops out of Syria and Afghanistan precipitous. He said after 17 years, we've been there for 17 years, going on 18. So Rand Paul said the U.S. had secured a victory in Afghanistan because it got bin Laden. Actually, Rand, no, we didn't. The real bin Laden died of natural causes in late 2001. He said it disrupted the people who attacked us. Well, again, Afghanistan didn't attack us. I mean, right after 9/11, Afghanistan got the blame for 9/11. Then it got shifted over into Iraq. And no doubt they're going to start saying that Iran had something to do with it as they build a case for a war there. But basically, Rand Paul made a good point. He said the money being spent on the war could be better spent domestically, including on a border wall. And he's absolutely right about that. If you think about all the money that has been spent in Afghanistan and Syria and Iraq, and what good it could have done here in this country. And as I've said before, we're in a wartime economy. Nobody wants to admit it, but that's where we are. You know, all the wealth is being sucked out of this country. It's going to the war machine. It's going to Israel. It's going to the money junkies. There's nothing left over for the American people, and that's why our roads are crumbling, our bridges are failing, our dams are in danger of collapsing. I mean, you don't need me to tell you this. When you drive around your town, your village, and just look at the condition of everything, you can see how deteriorated and dilapidated it's all become. That's because all the money is going to bombs, bullets, and butter. Alrighty, Donald Trump could conceivably start moving nuclear missiles to Europe for the first time in 30 years this weekend. Now, the U.S. is threatening to pull out of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. It is claiming that Russia is in violation. Russia says, no, they're not in violation. Come and look at the rocket. You know, we'll show you what we've got here. It's well within the treaty limits. But the U.S. is threatening to pull out of the treaty, which bans the long-range nuclear missiles and their deployment in Europe. And they're saying Trump has broken the 1987 agreement. Trump is also saying that the NATO allies are fully supporting the U.S. suspending the obligations under the INF. Oh, yes, NATO wants more nuclear missiles in Europe because, all those launching sites, they become targets in an actual nuclear exchange. Oh, yes, let's put up a nuclear missile here, right in the middle of town. Won't that be a really good thing? All right, let's take a phone call from Charles in St. Petersburg. Aloha, Charles. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Is this Michael?
It should be. I'm wearing his underwear.
Oh, yeah. You don't sound the same on my phone as you do on radio. I didn't know if you had guest host. Yeah, I just saw some article in the recent the truthseeker.co.uk from the Veterans Today, an article on this fellow Guaido, who's supposed to be the replacement to the head of Venezuela,
Maduro, yes.
Yeah, Maduro, yeah. It's an interesting thing. It was in Veterans Today that they're going deeper into, the forces behind, who Guaido is. They have a picture of him in a Masonic lodge, and there was the author. I don't know who the author was, but it's saying this is probably a infighting between the Jesuits and Freemasonry.
No. This is right from the United States of America. I mean, they basically come on out and said they want to remake Latin America, and they're starting with Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba. And they're looking at this Guaido. He's apparently been groomed. Some sources are saying he wasn't even born in Venezuela. So yeah, he's an outside actor.
Well, they were saying, or in this article, that Guaido represents the old aristocracy, whereas what's his name? I can't think of his name. You were just saying his name is Venezuela. It represents the poor, wealthy, that have come into power.
Okay.
Let's say the fellows. I'm sorry, and it's the ins against the outs. I mean,
all revolution is the outs against the ins.
Families. Yeah. Well, yeah, I recognize the United. This is more warmongering. The part of it, it's complete 180 of what Trump was talking about, pulling out of NATO, getting out of Europe, getting out of all these. Now he's become the biggest warmonger you could ever imagine. I was for Trump to begin with. The Trump that was running for president, but now he's done a 180, and I totally agree with you're saying there. About the United States has no business, telling another country what government it can have. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of players involved here, as I've said many times before. Wars, assassinations, revolutions, they never happen for just one reason. They happen when you have a group which have their own agendas, but all of their agendas are solved by the same action. And
have you seen the thing by the Corbett report about World War I? It was 3 videos they put out recently in the last month.
No, I didn't. But Charles, listen, Charles, I'm going to have to put you on hold. Got to put you on hold. We got to take a break for commercials. Don't hang up. I want to come back to you and hear about World War I. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're still talking with Charles in St. Petersburg, and he mentioned the Corbett report came out with something about World War I.
Yeah, how it came about, how the people, the Triple Entente was the alliance of before World War I of Britain with France and Russia, and I was not aware of this, but the people during the First World War, except for the elite in the Round Table, the Rhodes Milner secret group, knew nothing about the Triple Alliance. Lloyd George, who was later Prime Minister of England during the First World War, and Parliament knew nothing about it. And this was already entered into secretly before the First World War. So Germany was trapped. The Kaiser was just fooled. He was thought, according to propaganda, as being a militarist. But look who's talking. The United States or England or France. Or a real militarist power. Germany had only been a nation since 1871. And here's a secret. I was unaware of this. Is a secret treaty that was already entered into before the First World War, got started.
The agenda was to destroy Germany as an economic competitor for Great Britain, because if you remember, World War I actually began between Serbia and Austria-Hungary following the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, and somehow the corporate media convinced all Americans that Germany was all of a sudden the enemy.
The Kaiser was always portrayed as with a helmet on and a wicked militarist, and in Hollywood we had the Max Stroheim character.
Yeah,
there's always and Germany and the United States after 1870 were the enemies of England because they were just taking all their business away from them. England had to do something. What England did is bring the United States ruling class into a partnership. They were kind of in a partnership anyway with the opium cartel, but bring them into the empire, and then set a trap for the Kaiser, who was kind of a chump, really. I think of him as a chump, a fool.
Well, he got suckered in. There's no question about that. And the U.S. was brought on in with that deception involving the Lusitania. And, then they absolutely crushed Germany. They forced Germany to pay off the war debts of all the participating countries. And Germany just suffered under economic hardship until the rise of the Nazi Party, which kicked out the private central bank imposed by the Treaty of Versailles, established a value-based currency, and Germany's economy lit up like a Christmas tree. And that's why Hitler got to be Time Magazine's Man of the Year. I think it was in 1933 for what was called the German miracle, the German economic miracle. And all of a sudden, Germany was this powerhouse of manufacturing and industry. And once again, they were a threat to Great Britain. And Winston Churchill, he wasn't quite prime minister yet, but he was all over the radio saying, if Germany's allowed to continue to merchandise across Europe, then we fought World War I in vain. And so that was a big reason for World War II. Was, again, it's easier to declare war on a business competitor and smash them down than to try and improve your own manufacturing and industry.
Did you know that in 1939, September 1939, Germany went into Poland after they had tax on German. A lot of German citizens were under Czech, Polish, or Romanian rule because of the Versailles Treaty in 1919. Mm-hmm. But guess who? France and England declared war on Germany, but the USSR occupied half of Poland. No such thing happened to them.
Nope.
That's never explained.
Nope.
I think there was a secret treaty, just like they had in the First World War.
They just all got together and said, we're going to crush Germany because we can't compete with its industrial base. The Germans are just legendary for making good products, making good machinery, making good cars, and the other countries just simply could not compete. Well,
biochemistry was almost alone. Many things in discoveries in the 19th century were German in the 20th century.
Yeah.
In chemistry.
No, they were leading scientists.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the most brilliant minds of that age were coming out of Germany. People like Einstein. They had this amazing education system that was, driving students and pushing them to excel, and was producing these, these wonderful minds. Anyway, Charles, got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials. Back with more news after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Article out of Russia Today, basically pointing out that John Bolton is basically committed to punishing anyone who resists the writ of Washington. Now, the question is, where's this writ coming from? Because I'm not sure it's coming from Trump. I think it's coming from Bolton. I think basically, Bolton has come on in and told Donald Trump, I will run the foreign policy, I'll run the war agenda. And he's just running all over the globe here. And I think he's leading us into disaster. I mean, after 17, going on 18 years of war in multiple countries, we're running out of material. Military recruitment is not meeting its goals. The machinery is wearing out. The new products coming out of the military-industrial complex are crap. Let's call it what it is. If we get into a major scrap with a military peer, I mean, we're doing okay against these little tiny Middle Eastern countries that can't really defend themselves. We do okay. Against a military peer like Russia and China, I think we're going to lose. John Bolton never met a war he didn't really like. Over in France, the government has taken a very hard line against the yellow vests, and it has caused a bit of controversy. And apparently, France's legal advisory body, the Council of State, is examining an urgent request by the French Human Rights League and the CGT trade union to ban police from using a form of rubber bullet launcher in which ball-shaped projectiles are shot out of a specialized handheld launcher. And they're also petitioning the government to ban so-called sting ball grenades. Now, these are little launched munitions that contain 25 grams of TNT, trinitrotoluene high explosive. France is the only European country where crowd control police are allowed to use these powerful grenades, which deliver an explosion of small rubber balls that creates a stinging effect, as well as launching an additional load of tear gas. Now, these grenades are very loud and they can blind people. French members of parliament are condemning the authoritarian plans to curtail the Yellow Vest protest. And apparently they've approved measures to ban what the government calls brute troublemakers from street demonstrations as the Yellow Vests enter their 12th week. And there were a lot of debates, heated exchanges about that. But a lot of members of parliament said the measures posed an authoritarian threat to civil liberties. So there is a little bit of a pushback against all of this. Emmanuel Macron apparently is trying to find some way to win the sympathies of the Yellow Vests. Now, you need to understand, Macron, he's a multimillionaire. He earned millions as an investment banker. And he tends to make speeches to the poorest French citizens from rooms that are just dripping with gold. Doesn't send a good message. But he's changing tactics on out there. And in an interview with French media, he said, if being a yellow vest means wanting fewer parliamentarians and work being paid better, I'm a yellow vest too. So he's trying to build sympathy with the yellow vests. He wants fewer parliamentarians, and he wants to be paid more as president of France. Maybe, maybe not. Down in Mexico, something very interesting is happening. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has declared an end to Mexico's war on drugs, announcing that the army would no longer prioritize capturing cartel bosses. And he came out with a statement: there is officially no more war. We want peace, and we're going to achieve peace, meaning they lost. They lost the war on drugs. And he was asked if his government had captured any drug kingpins since he assumed office in December, to which he replied, no capos have been arrested because that's not our main purpose. The main purpose of the government is to guarantee public safety. What we want is security to reduce the daily number of homicides, which would be a good thing. I mean, right now, Tijuana's just got this insane homicide rate down there, which is tied up with the meth traffic down there. But to me, this sounds like a surrender, that the drug lords have won. They're now in control of Mexico. Coming soon to a city near you here. Okay, the other day we were talking about how Airbnb had decided to delist illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian West Bank. And this declaration preempted a Human Rights Watch report on Airbnb and Booking.com. Booking.com had no comment. But basically, there's a new report out from Amnesty International about how Airbnb, Booking.com, Expedia, and TripAdvisor are all benefiting from the Israeli occupation in the West Bank, because the settlers will go on in there. They'll build these accommodations on stolen Palestinian land, which means they're not having to pay for it. And they're able to basically rent them out through Booking.com and Airbnb at a very low rate because they're not paying for the land. And that makes them attractive to tourists, and the tourists come on in and spend money. And the cycle just continues. But basically, all of these booking agencies, they're profiting from war crimes. Another story, this one from Electronic Intifada. TripAdvisor among the firms profiting from Israeli war crimes. And basically saying that Airbnb, TripAdvisor, Booking.com, Expedia are fueling and profiting from war crimes by listing hundreds of destinations in Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem. And pointing out that TripAdvisor is one of the world's biggest travel booking and recommendation websites. And that very often these listings fail to indicate that they're located in the illegal settlements. And Amnesty International is basically calling for these companies to stop doing business in or with the settlements. We'll see if that actually happens or not. All right. Israeli snipers have shot down 45 child Gaza protesters in the occupied Palestinian territories. In fact, 56 were killed in 2018, 45 of them in the Gaza Strip since March 30th. In the overwhelming majority of these cases, DCIP was able to confirm children did not present any imminent mortal threat of serious injury when killed by the Israeli forces. They were simply gunned down. And the report concludes that Israeli forces and officials are responsible for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and other serious violations of international law for the killing of Palestinian child protesters in Gaza. And you need to look at the way things are set up along that Gaza fence. I mean, the Gazans are on basically their side of the fence. They're carrying flags. The Israelis have basically fortifications 200 yards away. They're in these bulletproof fortification bunkers. They're in bunkers, and they shoot through the little windows at the Gazans using these what are called butterfly bullets. So it's impossible for the Gazans to present a physical threat, a threat of force against the Israelis. It's just not happening here. PCHR has issued their weekly report on Israeli human rights for this last week. Continuing with the systematic crimes, apparently 3 Palestinian civilians, including a boy and a girl, were killed by the Israeli forces and settlers in the West Bank. The girl was killed at a military checkpoint under the claim that she attempted to carry out a stabbing attack. And I remember reading that story, and the Israelis showed a photo, supposedly, of the knife that she carried that she was going to attack the troops with. It's just a kitchen knife. It's an ordinary kitchen knife here. 24 civilians, including a child, were wounded. Israeli forces continue to use excessive force against peaceful protesters in the Gaza Strip. A Palestinian civilian was killed while another succumbed to his wounds. 146 civilians, including 38 children, 4 women, a journalist, and 6 paramedics, were also wounded here. And apparently there was another issue where a Palestinian teenager sustained multiple fractures in his legs after being beaten up by Israeli soldiers near Jenin City in the northern West Bank. This is coming from the Palestinian Red Crescent Society. And PRC official Mohammed Saadi told WAFA 17-year-old Majdi Abu Ghali from Jenin was beaten severely by Israeli soldiers after he entered the site of the abandoned Israeli settlement of Ghanim east of Jenin. And apparently the teen was unaware of the Israeli soldiers who'd raided the evacuated settlement and was surprised by the soldiers who attacked and beat him for no reason. And the kid wound up being sent to the hospital. There is another report here. Israel is stealing resources in occupied Golan. Well, we know they've been stealing the oil and gas. They wanted to build a pipeline across Syria to send it to Europe. Syria said no for the obvious reason. That was one of the reasons for the war. But apparently now Israel has mounted a project to build a giant wind farm. And Syria, like so many other places that is looking at wind power, considers the wind to be a resource, and that Israel does not, in fact, have a right to build anything on the Golan, that it violates international law. And if you're hearing that siren in the background, this is the 1st of February. They always test our tsunami and our ballistic missile sirens at this time. So it's a little unsettling, especially after that goof we had earlier, well, last year, when they actually sent out the alert. There's a ballistic missile coming on and really freaked out a lot of people here. Okay. Story coming out of New York Books here, talking about the pro-Israel push to purge U.S. campus critics. And again, this is an attack on our First Amendment right to freedom of speech. And the article is saying there are signs we've reached a tipping point in U.S. public recognition of Israel's suppression. American Jewish population is saying this is not a good thing anymore. And we've got members of Congress are saying, which was what was once forbidden, maybe the U.S. should question its unqualified diplomatic and financial support for Israel. Yeah, it should. Members of Congress are saying, should we hold Israel to the same human rights scrutiny we apply to other nations around the globe? Yes, of course we should. No nation should be above international law. So Israel is increasing their pressure to try and get laws passed that will criminalize criticism of the government of Israel. They're trying to get colleges and universities to shut down pro-Palestinian supporters. And all of it, of course, is a threat to our First Amendment right to freedom of speech. And on that reason alone, we should be opposed to it. We have to hang on to that First Amendment. It is the most important amendment. It is absolutely the most important amendment. We have to hang on to it. All right, now the other day we were talking about how Israel had banned observers, international observers, from Hebron, and Fatah has come on out speculating that Israel is getting ready for a second massacre in Hebron, and that's why they've kicked out all the international observers, that they plan to seize the old city and the Ibrahimi Mosque and complete the colonial plan of the city. And the Palestinian Authority has succeeded in reviving the old city of Hebron by rebuilding houses and shops there and opening schools and institutions. Oh, it's looking really good. And let's see. All righty. Let me respond to this. Somebody's saying that YouTube is offline, at least up in Seattle here. All right, let's talk about Eurovision. This is becoming very, very controversial. First of all, when Israel won the Eurovision contest previously, there were accusations basically that the vote was rigged, that Israel had organized a huge number of people to go on in and vote in the Eurovision contest for the Israeli entertainer, as it were, in order to bring Eurovision to Israel the next year. And a lot of people are saying this was not right. There are some entertainment groups who are saying they're going to boycott Eurovision in Israel, both because of the accusations of election rigging and because of Israel's treatment of the Palestinians. Now, Israel is out there still claiming they're a light unto the nations. Well, it's a very, very bad light here. And this article, which appeared in Middle East Monitor, is saying that, yes, Israel's international standing continues to sink, and rightfully so. It should. Israel is behaving badly. Israel's government is behaving badly. And it's not anti-Semitism to say so. We're not talking about religion. We're not talking about ethnicity. We're not talking about somebody's historical traditions. We're talking about the actions of individuals in government. They are bad, and we have every right to call them out on it. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, as we reported yesterday, Donald Trump threw a bit of a tantrum with his intelligence chiefs, who were basically reporting to him that Iran does not appear to be doing anything along the path of creating nuclear weapons. And of course, that's not the narrative that Trump wanted to hear. Trump wants to hear that Iran is a threat. We've got to go to war against Iran. We've got to do all these bad things to it. But we really do need to ask the question, who is the real threat to world peace? And there's an article out of Global Research up in Canada pointing out, you know, Iran is non-nuclear. Israel is nuclear. They've got somewhere around 400 weapons of mass destruction. We're not really sure. Israel refuses to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. They refuse IAEA inspections. The IAEA, of course, is all over Iran, and they're reporting Iran is still keeping to the terms of the P5+1 deal. Iran is playing by the rules. They're building nuclear power plants. Russia's building them, actually, for Iran. And Iran is allowed to have those because Iran has signed and ratified the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So has the United States. And we need to remember that Israel is the one that is out there with these rogue nuclear weapons. And at one point, Israel tried to sell a nuclear weapon, or possibly more than one, to the former government of South Africa. When the former government of South Africa fell and the new government came in, these documents surfaced. So Israel is actually selling nuclear weapons to other countries around the world. And if they were selling them to South Africa, who knows who else bought one? We don't know. And we can't know. Israel is using the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to sort of create a market monopoly where they're the only ones out there selling nukes and they can charge whatever they want for them. Israel is thought to have teamed with South Africa in a joint nuclear test called the Vela incident. So who's the danger to world peace? Iran has not initiated a war of conquest against another nation in 200 years, and certainly not since the Iranian Revolution. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here from Tom in Florida. Tom, aloha. I'm probably going to have to take you through station identification. What is on your mind?
Good day to you, Michael. Yeah, what's on my mind, Michael, I just saw the news this morning about they had a big drug bust at the border, and it's enough fentanyl to kill over 50 million Americans. And I'm wondering, there's not a crisis at the border. Pelosi and Schumer say there's not a crisis at our border. Michael, they should be held and they should be put in jail because they're aiding and abetting the murder of American citizenry.
Well, I'm sure that the people who are buying the fentanyl, don't intend to die. But it is a very, very powerful chemical here. But yeah, certainly.
Yeah, hang on. I got something else to say. Okay, I'll hang on.
No, I was going to.
Yep.
I was going to say certainly they're aiding and abetting the drug trade, and maybe it's time for RICO action and maybe a little civil forfeiture of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. Anyway, we got to take a short break. Stay on the line, Tom.
Hang on.
Stay on the line. We'll come right back to you after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. We're talking with Tom in Florida. We're talking about this huge bust down at the border of fentanyl. It was a huge amount of this synthetic opioid, and the corporate media is framing it in terms of the number of people it could kill if it was abused. But you're absolutely right. Everybody who's in favor of open borders, they're contributing to this problem.
Well, absolutely, Michael. And I'd like to know, Michael, this: how come the RNC is not running ads like this against these Democrats to expose them? And how can people still keep voting for Pelosi and Schumer? Maybe Schumer I understand, but Pelosi, I mean, there's 80,000 homeless in San Francisco, needles everywhere, and they still vote for this woman to be a congresswoman and Speaker of the House on top of it. It's almost absurd to me, and I don't believe what's happened in the United States as far as the drug crisis, and it's just amazing to me, Michael, that nothing's being done. It's just keep flooding the country, more illegals, more drugs. Nothing's being done. And then you got, on top of that, Michael, you got this thing with Roger Stone, how they treated him. I honestly believe that Roger Stone is going to be the linchpin that's going to take Mueller down. I think the pin's going to be pulled on Mueller because of Stone, because I don't think Roger Stone did anything bad at all. And I'm wondering myself, how did this guy Mueller make so much money off of Boeing? I think it was Boeing, or what was it? He made $40 million off of Boeing, I believe it was.
Something like that. Absolutely.
What did he do to make so much money?
As far as Pelosi is concerned, I mean, we know that election fraud is rampant in this country. And, I remember back when John McCain was still with us, and he kept getting reelected and reelected and reelected. And I had friends in Arizona who kept saying, nobody we know has voted for this guy. We don't understand how he's winning his elections. But we know election fraud is rampant in this country. I mean, Pelosi is a wreck. She had a press conference yesterday where she's stumbling over her words, and just clearly not in possession of all of her faculties.
Well, Michael, her face is so stretched out. She's a bumbling idiot, if you ask me. I can bring the fact up to what you're saying. I have a brother. I have family members in Arizona. I have a lot of family out in Arizona, and none of them voted for McCain. And my brother would tell me, I don't know how is this guy getting elected, because everybody he was knowing and talking to on the golf course and all that, they say nobody is voting for McCain. So how is this guy getting elected all the time? Lame brain. I don't understand it.
It's election fraud.
And then you have Meghan McCain crying like he's the greatest thing in the world. No, your dad wasn't the greatest thing in the world. Meghan McCain's out there whining her. Look at the things he did. Donald Trump. Maybe she'd think about giving him $1 for the wall. In the meantime, you had Kate Steinle murdered in that state. You had all these 4 Americans that's murdered in Reno, and that this woman doesn't want to help Trump defend our border. She should be put in jail and locked up and throwing the keys to her away. She's a bigger criminal than the criminals.
The Democrats are depending on the illegal immigrant vote. I mean, this thing down in Texas, The current estimate now is that 900,000 illegal immigrants just in Texas alone voted in the midterms.
900,000?
Yeah.
I didn't hear that. I thought it was 58,000.
No,
Yeah,
the numbers keep going up. They're finding that this is a huge problem.
Well, I can tell you, Michael, here in Florida is the same problem. We got illegal voters in Florida. They don't talk about it. Like when the Broward County thing was going on with that Brenda Snipes.
Yeah,
that was a disgrace. What Broward happened to Broward, thank God DeSantis got in there and he straightened that nightmare out. But I mean, you know, these liberal Democrats are just trying to look what they're doing now with the abortion and I mean, a woman can have an abortion at 8 months. What is that?
No, 9 months. 9 months. They're pushing it to 9 months. You know, look at Virginia, that they can abort the baby after birth. Now, to me, that's murder and infanticide. And
absolutely.
You know, apparently, when the governor was on the radio trying to justify this legislation, he basically admitted that they're looking at opportunities for harvesting organs.
Well, Michael, one more story, and I'll let you go. I know you got other callers. Did you see what happened with California, the Chinese? They busted 20 people, and the women are coming over like crazy, dropping babies.
Yep.
Saw that story? Well, I think it's a lot more than 20. It's more like maybe 20,000 could keep coming here every year having kids. And then why are they actually doing that? I forgot why they're doing that. They have the kids become citizens or something, and then they bring the whole chain migration in here or something?
Well, because of the way the laws are currently written, if a baby is born in this country, it's automatically a U.S. citizen. And it needs to be changed. Yeah, that has to stop. And so all of these illegal immigrants, they're coming on over here. They pop out an anchor baby. That's what they call them. And then they say, we have to stay. My baby is a citizen of this country here, and I have to be here to take care of them. And it's a scam, and they've been using it. And the cost of medical care for all these illegals popping out these babies, I mean, that's being picked up by the taxpayer. That's way more than Trump wants for his wall.
Yep, there you go. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing what's happened. Well, Michael, the whole thing is what you said. They're trying to change the demographic of the United States, and that's the whole modus of operandi, to change the demographic of the nation at all costs. That's what they're so far left now. It's insane.
Yes.
These people are tweaked. It's terrible. It's terrible. But we'll see what happens with Trump. I think, Michael, on Tuesday night, he gives a speech. I think on Wednesday, when you wake up in the morning, he's going to declare emergency, and he's going to build that wall. He's going to use the military to build the wall Wednesday. Remember I told you Wednesday afternoon he's probably going to have a speech, build the wall. And you know what? Now that the Democrats, I would have given him DACA. I would have given him CACA. I would have given him nothing. No DACA, no CACA, nothing. Report them all. You're here illegally. You broke the law. The law's on the books, and we're going to take the same laws that Mexico has on their immigration when it comes in immigrating to Mexico. Try to go in Mexico and immigrate. See what happens to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Try to sneak into Mexico.
Yeah, you can't just walk across the border and get free stuff. You walk across the border without the permission of the Mexican government, you go to jail.
A gulag. It's a gulag, Michael. They don't give you a real nice jails in Mexico. I can tell you that. I remember Greta Van Susteren went down there when the young guy had the guns or something. That guy was treated like garbage. I don't know if you remember that story. American was arrested, and she went down there to Van Susteren and helped him the young man get out of jail. You remember that case?
I remember that case. Yeah. No, it's Mexican jails are not pleasant, but you know, jails and prisons aren't supposed to be pleasant. You're in them because you did something that society does not agree with here. But again, if you want to be totally fair, the United States should have the same border control and the same immigration laws as Mexico does. You go down to that southern border of Mexico and you look at that fence they have, that is really serious fence building. And by the way, if Trump gets the military to build that border wall, the military has enough money. They can build it all the way from San Diego to the Rio Grande, and that's what has to happen. They can't just build it in sections because the human smugglers will just, they'll just drive further and drive around to where the wall isn't there. And again, I want to go back to this law that was passed that funded 700 miles of border wall, of which only 33 miles was built. And I want to know, where did that money go, and who was responsible for saying we're going to stop here at 33 miles?
Good point. Great point, Michael. And Michael, one more thing. Can you imagine if you go to Mexico and get arrested, you have to drink their water and eat their food? How would you be in prison after you drank their water and ate their food in Mexico?
Well, it all depends on where you are, and
you may wish you were dead.
Well, I've been to Mexico a few times, and I didn't have a problem either with the water or the food. In fact, I thought the food was really good. I like good Mexican food.
Well, maybe not. Maybe yeah, but not in the prisons. I don't think so.
No, I imagine. Well, I've never been in a Mexican prison, so I really wouldn't know here. I was in more
either, but I'm just saying.
The resort kind of experience here. Okay.
I understand. Yes, sir. Understand.
All right. So thanks an awful lot.
They have a great culture in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways they don't. Thank you, Michael.
Well, it's their culture, and the experience. Now, I will admit, going to and from Las Hadas, going through the middle of Guadalajara, that looked very rough. But the other experiences were very, very positive. Anyway, so we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. The phone lines are empty. Alrighty. More and more bits of that new report on the F-35 are being leaked out. And you want to talk about a piece of junk. This latest leak is basically confirming what we reported yesterday, that the planes were designed for an 8,000 flight hour lifespan. In other words, it could stay in the air for 8,000 hours, not counting, runway time, refueling time, and so forth, but 8,000 hours, which when you consider what the cost of an F-35 is, that's a lot of money per hour. But unfortunately, they're saying, based on the planes they've got now, they'll be lucky to get to 2,100 hours. And worse than that, there is so much problems with maintenance and downtime. The F-35s are not hitting the target value of 60%. In other words, this plane, 60% of them are supposed to be available for actual mission operations. Not 100%, just 60%, just over half of them. And they didn't hit that. And worse, apparently the accuracy of its guns is unacceptable. And I've heard about the problems with the guns. Apparently the guns, the recoil is so powerful, it's actually distorting the frame of the aircraft. And by the way, the final software for the gun still isn't ready. It's not going to be ready till later this year. And to try and deal with some of these problems, they've actually put what's called a G-pod, a gun pod, on the centerline belly of the F-35, adding more weight, making it less maneuverable, less fast, because the internal cannon has got all these problems. It looks really cool, but it can be out-dog fought by 1970s vintage aircraft. The F-35 can be brought down by an F-15 or an F-16 if it gets into a dogfight. It's over-reliant on its high-tech, which is not working out very well. And it's a criticism I've had of some of the Navy's newer ships, where they don't bother with armor anymore, the way the old battle wagons used to have here. It's a lot of aluminum, a lot of thin skin, and they rely on the active defensive systems, which if they don't work, makes the ship very vulnerable. And I remember this story from a few years ago about how one of the Aegis-class ships was experimenting with a drone, and the pilot of the drone made a mistake and crashed it into the housing over the spy radar. And it crashed right through the housing and took out a $30 million computer. Anyway, so story coming out of the American Mirror, and this gets back to what I was saying with that caller about Nancy Pelosi. And they're saying, what's wrong with her? And they're saying Pelosi spoke to reporters for about 21 minutes, but there were all these strange moments. She botched words, suffered face spasms and brain freezes while she attacked President Trump's proposed border wall and his leadership during the recent partial government shutdown. And of course, she's still out there saying there will be no money for the wall. There will be no money for the wall, which, as Tom was pointing out, she's an accessory to the drug traffic that's coming across the border. Now, Speaker Pelosi also avoided any questions on Virginia Governor Ralph Northam's comments about the abortion law they're pushing in Virginia, which is kind of a mirror of the one that just got passed in New York. So Northam is advocating for late-term and post-birth abortion. And Pelosi refused to comment on what is turning out to be very controversial sentiments. There's been a lot of outrage about this. Now, Governor Northam himself used to be a doctor. And he endorsed this bill in the Virginia legislature introduced by Delegate Kathy Tran that would effectively allow late-term abortions for any reason, even once the mother is in labor. And Northam and Tran have both tried to retroactively clarify their statements and take them back, but they're both on video saying what they were saying. Now, there is one person who's pulled back, Dawn Adams, who basically co-sponsored this bill, and she's now gone public saying she just didn't read it. She signed on to it and didn't really read it and understand it. So she's apologized to her constituents. And yeah, come on, guys, that's your job. Read the bills before you sign on to them, okay? That's what you're supposed to do. And again, Governor Northam, in that video interview that he did at the radio station, he actually came out and he said they'll keep the babies comfortable before organ harvesting. So that's what's in there. Are they going to encourage mothers to be factories for spare parts now? It's absolutely sick. And as you know from me, I'm kind of on the fence about abortion. I understand there are circumstances, rape, incest, severe birth abnormalities, where abortion is needed and justified. I do draw the line at abortion as a convenient form of retroactive birth control because the woman just didn't want to be seen as that kind of woman and wasn't using birth control. I have a real problem with that. I have a real problem with women who want an abortion who don't get one right away. How can a woman even think of going 9 months of pregnancy and then at the last second say, I changed my mind? That is utterly, utterly ridiculous. And another issue that I have with the current abortion laws is that the husbands are completely left out. The husbands have got nothing to say about it. And I think that if a man and a woman get married and the man says he wants to have a family and the woman says, yes, I agree, we're going to have a family, that the man should have some input if the woman gets pregnant and she says, I'm going to have an abortion. Anyway. Alrighty. Okay, this is from Judicial Watch, and I misspoke earlier. It's 900,000 illegal immigrants nationwide voted in the midterms. And depending upon where they were put, that's enough to swing a lot of districts. And again, look what we saw in California. California, traditionally a red state, all of a sudden it got shifted blue because the illegal immigrants are being sent into districts that are just slightly red in order to shift them blue. And every single one of those illegal immigrant votes is a criminal action. And why is nobody doing anything about it? Why aren't the Republicans doing something about this? I mean, they're the ones who are getting cheated. Why isn't Trump doing something about this? We need a national voter ID law. It is not racist to demand an ID. You have to have an ID when you're driving a car. You have to have an ID when you're buying alcohol or tobacco. You have to have an ID for all kinds of stuff. Take out a library book, you have to have an ID. Why not have an ID for voting? Why in this one area is voter ID considered racist? We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Mike, you know, when I'm watching what's going on, like with these abortion laws in New York and what they're trying to, and that Kathy Tran there is, and the governor of Virginia is trying to pass in Virginia. And when I look at the Gestapo-like, it was the Gestapo-like raid there in Roger Stone there by the American SS called they're known as the FBI. I start wondering, did we really win World War II, or did the Nazis really win? Because, okay, maybe we don't have maybe all blonde-haired men are not in charge like the Nazis envisioned and all that, but their spirit seems to have survived and taken us over. I mean, you know, I've been watching this show on I got Apple TV now. I've been watching this show called Man in the High Castle. I'm fascinated by that. You know, have you seen it?
No, not yet.
Yeah, basically it's about if God forbid the Germans and the Japanese had won World War II and occupied the United States. But for all intents and purposes, I'm getting the feeling that's exactly what's happening in spirit. It's not in name. Like I said again, okay, we don't have a bunch of blonde hair. Well, you didn't really in Germany either. Most of the top Nazis didn't look anywhere near what they said they were.
The Aryan ideal, the Atlanteans.
Yeah, but in reality, okay, we don't have all blonde-haired men taking over the country and all that and pushing some kind of their own racial agenda. But we do have in spirit. It just seems to me when you look at the kind of police state that's forming here, and again, these kind of abortion laws. I mean, to actually kill a full-term baby and think it's all right and talk in such almost methodical terms. Like I heard that woman talking, and I heard this clown of a governor there in Virginia talking, and a dirty rat like Cuomo there in New York. I mean, it's a governor. It just seems to me the Nazis won. Okay?
Well, you remember Operation Paperclip at the end of World War II? It wasn't just scientists they brought over here. They brought over, propagandists. They basically, the United States policy at the end of World War II was that, the Nazis, even though they lost the war, they'd had some really good ideas, and the U.S. set about copying them.
You got a point there. As a matter of fact, there's something about that now on this Project Blue Book I'm watching now on a History Channel.
Yes.
Project Paperclip brought over. You're right. You definitely got a point there. I mean, experimenting on people is another thing they do. They've been doing. Look at some of the so-called experiments they've done, like the Tuskegee experiment where they injected a bunch of black men with the syphilis virus. And
yeah.
there's been other
and the scandal for that one is they kept the experiment going even after a cure for syphilis was found. And just let these guys suffer. And the U.S. government has a very long and dark record of allowing human experimentation, and it's actually written into the law that the U.S. government can conduct mass human experiments on the general population without informing them and without consent.
Almost again like the spirit of head doctor there. What's his name? In Mengele?
Yeah,
like his spirit also survived. I mean, it's crazy. I just don't know where we're going, Mike. I really don't. I love this country, but I'm telling you, I really hate more and more the people that are in charge of it. And I hate the corporate structure. I hate a lot of this stuff. I just hate where we're going, Mike. I don't know I don't know what can be done to reverse it. Maybe you have better ideas.
We're going to have to let it crash. We're going to have to let it fall down, go boom.
And what's going to happen then? You got such madmen in charge now. I'm afraid they might commit mass suicide and just start firing missiles all over the place, nuclear missils. Of course,
well,
you know,
it didn't happen when the Soviet Union collapsed. You know, I mean, we have to look back at the formation of the Russian republics, or we can look back at the Romanian Revolution, and they got through that. You know, we got through our revolution more or less intact. We're just going to have to make sure that the people who messed up this country are no longer allowed to be in it, and we get some people to form a new government who are really representative of the American people, working people, people who know how to make things, manufacture things, and get, you know, and just stay away from this permanent ruling class of hereditary politicians and ultra wealthy.
But you know, the problem with that, Mike, is I'm not sure if at least certainly at the end of the Soviet Union, whether they had the kind of madmen that in charge of them that we've got in charge of us. On top of that, you talk about Israel's, right? I understand they've got a plan. It's called Operation Masada or something like that, where they'll blow up the world. They'll start firing
That's
off
the Samson option. That's the Samson option. Yeah. Okay, Mark, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Jim in New York. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir. I'd just like to chime in and what drives me nuts about the immigration issue is that it's a bipartisan screw job. Because you got to remember the Small Business Administration corporations find it favorable to have these guys come in because it drives down wages. And who are they support obviously the Republican Party. So, it just, every time I hear that, it's just the Democrats. It drives me mad because they both, what it is that Democrats play the bad guy, and they play the good guy. But I hate to tell you, it's both parties.
Well, again, this is what we get for not enforcing Title VIII, because everybody who hires an illegal immigrant is committing a crime.
But who's enforcing these laws? Nobody.
That's the problem. That's the problem.
And again, I'm not trying to, knock Republicans or whatever, but it just drives me mad that it is truly a bipartisan effort. And they both actually get benefit from both. Each party gets benefits from this, and it drives me bad every time I hear it.
Well, this gets back to the issue of why didn't Trump get his border wall, before the midterms when he had both houses of Congress under his control?
Correct. So could it be the Small Business Administration and the corporations put the screws to them and said, listen, back off, brother. This is this is going to affect our...
Well, there are a lot of players. I'm sure that people who employ illegal immigrants, are one part of wanting to keep the open borders. We know the globalists and the New World Order people are another aspect of keeping the borders open. And again, for the Democrats, they've made it very, very clear. They're dependent on illegal immigrant voters to hang on to power.
Correct. And, just on a lighter note, I heard you guys are talking about Nancy Pelosi. I heard Joan Rivers said if she has one more facelift, she's going to have a goatee.
Yes.
And another thing, I don't know if you have time, but I just wanted to maybe throw this out to you. What drives me nuts too is when I, cruise the general public or Johnny Sixpack, I always hear this line like, it doesn't affect me. When I talk about, why corporations or, for example, why insurance companies are buying radar detectors to see if people have insurance, and I got nothing to hide. And, I always use the Ben Franklin thing, anybody who sacrifices liberty for security deserves neither.
Yes.
But it doesn't seem to work on Johnny Sixpack. It works like when I talk to my local sheriff. It works if I talk to a fellow patriot, whatever. But I was always, very curious if someone could come up with a 2-line rebut to that would appeal to the general population. I know you're very quick-witted. You're very quick-witted.
Well, I think one reply would be that you can ignore politics, but politics will not ignore you.
Again, I think that's just it's too heavy. I'm trying to think of something that would grab them. And maybe put this out to your audience. Maybe they have something. When they, in their travels as well. And a quote, something that's not. People look at me like Ben Franklin. Was that some old fart from, whenever? They don't get that. You know what I mean? But
well, that's a failure of our educational system. If you don't know who Ben Franklin is and all the things that he accomplished, I mean, really.
I know. But like I said, I just had this conversation with someone who's historically illiterate or doesn't care. You know what I mean? Just throw that out there. And I know you're, like I said, you're a wordsmith. You're very quick-witted. I really, really enjoy your humor.
Well, thank you.
That's usually, a gift from the Irish, The Irish are very, very quick-witted.
Well, I haven't done the 23andMe DNA test yet, and I'm probably not going to do it. But as far as I know, I don't have any Irish in my background. It's
at any Irish bar you would be accepted.
Well, I don't know, maybe on the English side of the family, because I consider myself French, English, Sephardic with a little bit of Chinese and Huron in there. That's my awareness of my family tree. Claire's the Irish. Claire is the Irish in the family.
Well, again, I truly enjoy your show, and maybe someone come up with a 2-liner that I have as a rebuttal to, it doesn't affect me. It drives me nuts when I hear that.
Yeah, well, that's what the Germans were saying in 1944.
Exactly. But you say that again if you're dealing with someone who's historically illiterate. Actually, that was more 1939, 1938. But someone who's historically, how do you convey this? I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's breaking through to people who don't want to face up to what's going on here. Anyway, Jim, we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call. And we're going to switch over to Philip in Virginia. Aloha, Philip. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Before you went to break, after you came back from break with Mark, you asked a question about the problems with the voting system here. And because I listened to what really happened with Mike Rivero, I can answer that question. Because there's a agreement that they have between the Republicans and the Democrats that they have to both consent to any investigation into the voting irregularities and problems. You remember that?
I remember that, but that's expired. That expired last year. That was the consent decree, and it was actually imposed only on the Republicans. And it was the result of a lawsuit from many, many years ago, and was one of the most absurd pieces of legal mumbo jumbo ever, because it basically gave the Democrats a license to steal elections, and the Republicans could not complain. But that expired this last year. I'd like to see them complaining. I'd like to see somebody complaining about the irregularities in the elections besides Tom Fitton. But it's like, and again, it's a bipartisan problem. Everybody's standing around there trying to keep the illusion going that we have fair and honest elections in this country. And we don't. We absolutely do not.
Well, damn, I missed that broadcast then. Because that was an asinine rule to begin with. Why would anybody consent to something like that?
It absolutely was.
I got
All right,
a question
well, Philip,
for you real quick.
Yeah, Philip, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're going to get on back to the news here. And going into 2020, Trump right now has a huge fundraising lead over the Democrats. Of course, there's a wide field of Democrats. I'm sure they're dividing up the campaign donations among them. But apparently, Donald Trump's 2020 presidential campaign has raised over $21 million just in the last 3 months of last year. So Trump has a huge head start over his Democratic challengers and presumably any Republican challengers that may show up during the primary, although the RNC has already given its endorsement to Donald Trump, saying he will be the candidate. So we'll see what's going to happen on that one. But apparently, Trump's campaign coffers right now total $129 million. It's a record amount for a sitting president at this point in the presidential election. Will this kind of money be sufficient to propel Trump into a second term? I don't know. Because, again, I think a lot of people are seeing Trump as a major disappointment. And I think he's going to have an uphill fight. Now, right now, the Democrats have not found a credible, if you will, challenger. And it's a wide field, so we don't know what the shakeout's going to be. The bad news, of course, is that Hillary's not ruling out stepping back in as well. And I'm sure the vote fraud will be twice as bad as it was back in 2016. All right, let's talk about the economic news here. Right now, 63 of America's largest 75 cities are completely broke. They're in debt, they're overspending. They can't pay their bills, and the total amount of unfunded debt among them is nearly $330 billion. Most of the debt is due to unfunded retiree benefits, such as pension and health care costs. That means that those who are depending on that money may not see any of it. And again, the reason the pensions are defunded goes all the way back to 2008 and the mortgage-backed security fraud, where the banks came up with these mortgage bundles. They were rated AAA by the rating agencies on Wall Street, which made it legal for pension funds to buy them. Then the whole fraud fell apart. The pensions got defunded. And that's why they're in trouble. Wall Street greed here. Russia and China are continuing to dump U.S. treasuries. And apparently the latest U.S. Treasury Department data shows that foreign investors slashed their holdings of American debt in November by $105 billion from a year earlier, down to $6.2 trillion. Now, China, which is the largest foreign holder of U.S. debt, slashed its holding for a sixth straight month in November. Beijing had $1.12 trillion in U.S. treasuries, down from $1.13 trillion in October. Now, I wonder where all this debt is going. Who's buying the debt? Right now, the United States does not look like a sure thing to me. It doesn't look like a good investment. It may be that the Federal Reserve is just creating money out of thin air and buying these treasury bonds back, which means this private central bank is going to wind up basically holding the pink slip on the government here. The European Union is now accusing 8 banks of rigging the European government bond markets. And I mean, first we had the LIBOR rigging cartel, then the foreign exchange rate manipulation cartel, and now the European regulators have moved on to prosecuting anti-competitive practices in euro-denominated sovereign bond markets. And apparently antitrust regulators have charged Deutsche Bank, Credit Agricole, and Credit Suisse of being part of a bond trading cartel. And regulators are bringing a separate case against 8 unidentified European banks, alleging they conspired to rig euro-denominated sovereign bond sales. Jesse James was right. The bankers are the real outlaws. Anyway, another story. This one's coming out of Investment Research Dynamics. And Investment Research Dynamics here. And the article's titled, appropriately enough, There Are Lies, Damned Lies, Statistics, and the Employment Report. And it's another article basically pointing on out that we are being lied to about the jobs numbers, about the unemployment. And we have known that, reported on that for many, many years. There are millions of Americans who have not been able to find work for extended periods of time. They're simply not counted anymore. And in this article, they're saying basically the Government Bureau of Lies and Statistics served up an employment report purporting 312,000 new jobs in December, while ignoring massive seasonal retail layoffs in the latter half of the month. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics counts those jobs when hired in October, but forgets to remove them when they're dismissed at the end of the holiday shopping season. And it was a horrible shopping season. Surging December payrolls were a reporting fraud, a canard, no more than massive prior period revisions. So you're being lied to again. You're being lied to. All right, getting on to immigration and the refugee situation. This is a real problem. Article out of National Review. Adult illegal immigrants are posing as children to enroll in high school. Now, these are adult illegal immigrants. They're posing as unaccompanied alien children. They're being allowed across the border, and they're enrolling at public high schools. Now, this article is specifically talking about a high school in Lynn, Massachusetts, as reported by National Review Online. And apparently, some of these people have gray hair and claiming they're 17 years old. They have no documentation. And Jamie Cerulli, the Lynn mayor's chief of staff, said, if my children went to the public schools, I'd be very uncomfortable with all of these unaccompanied minors that are placed in the 9th grade. Now, admission of all foreign students, illegal immigrants, refugees, and foreign nationals has increased by more than 500 students in this one high school since 2011. Last school year, nearly 250 students arrived from Guatemala, including 126 enrolled in the 9th grade. Now, you, the American taxpayer, are paying for all of this. And school resources are being stretched. The teachers, because they're spending time with these illegal immigrants, have less time to spend with the legal children who are supposed to be here. And this is another way where this out-of-control open border situation is harming our country. Got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Over in Great Britain, Nigel Farage is out there warning Britons are going to become even more angry with Brussels bureaucrats over their refusal to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement. And in an interview on Euronews, Farage described the arrogance, intransigence, no shift and no give from Brussels at all, which has certainly been very evident during the negotiation phase. And of course, they were dealing with Theresa May, whose agenda was to basically give them everything that they want. And so Jean-Claude Juncker has made it very clear there will be no renegotiation. So it looks right now that Britain is aiming at a hard Brexit. And the doom and gloomers are out there saying, oh, there's going to be mass starvation, there's going to be rioting in the streets, there's going to be panic. I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And again, I want to remind everybody that Donald Trump, at least back when he was campaigning, said that when Britain actually exits the European Union, there will be an immediate trade agreement with the United States. So there's not going to be that much of a disruption in terms of goods getting into the stores over in Great Britain. But Farage is right. I think the British people are getting very angry over how long this process has taken. They're getting angry at Brussels' continuing demands for divorce payments and various other concessions. And I think they're also getting very angry with Theresa May and their own government over the fact that so much of their own government seems determined to undo Brexit. And we're hearing daily, again, calls for a second referendum. You know, we're going to keep holding elections until we get the result that we want. All righty. The European Union has set up a payment mechanism to secure trade with Iran and basically skirt U.S. sanctions after Washington pulled out of the P5+1 deal last May. And this proposal of a financial instrument has been a key element in the EU's strategy to keep Iran from quitting the P5+1 agreement, which was signed to prevent Tehran from building nuclear weapons in exchange for sanctions relief, which, by the way, never happened. Now, this new institution named INSTEX, Instrument in Support of Trade Exchanges, will allow trade between the EU and Iran without relying on direct financial transactions involving the US dollar. It is a project of the governments of France, Germany, and Britain, and will receive the formal endorsement of all 28 EU members. Now, the Trump administration has been eyeing European efforts to establish the financial mechanism and warned any attempt to evade its maximum pressure campaign on Iran would be subject to stiff penalties. Oh, good. Let's go ahead and alienate Europe now. You know, we've ticked off everybody else on the planet. Let's alienate Europe. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be back after these few words. And decided that, well, she can't do the show today. And so I told her, get some rest, feel better. And I'm looking in on her during the commercial breaks, and we'll see what's going to happen with that. Anyway, getting on back to the news. Down in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis has signed an executive order scrapping Common Core. And all I can say is good for him, because Common Core has been an absolute disaster. And DeSantis' executive order directs Education Commissioner Richard Corcoran to develop a roadmap for a new way to educate the Sunshine State's children. And Florida moved to Common Core under Rick Scott, which he did to try and match standards for other students in the U.S., and that was a big sell of Common Core. Oh, you know, we're all going to follow the same standards of education. Well, you know something? That was kind of a failed concept. Because the education that children need in the urban environment is not the same education they need out in the rural agricultural areas. I mean, that's just common sense. And Florida made some tweaks to Common Core, rebranded it as Florida Standards, but it was still very close to Common Core. And critics of Common Core, including Tea Party groups, said it would take away local control and dumb down schools, which, yeah, that's always been a big issue. Who gets to control the curriculum at the school? The local community, you know, or the government? And a lot of parents found the curriculum confusing, especially some of the math. And I got to see a lot of this. We used to have a neighbor who was out here in Hawaii helping Hawaii adopt Common Core. And I got to see some of that stuff. And it was lunacy. Remember the Tom Lehrer song about new math? Common Core was far worse. And it was almost like they were teaching math in a way to make sure that people couldn't really solve complex problems. Because it was just bizarre. I mean, go out and do a web search, Common Core math problems, and you'll see just how bizarre it was. So good for DeSantis that he did this, and you know, hopefully they're going to get some sanity back in the schools here. Speaking of Florida, there is a group called Constitutional Campaigns. It's paying people $1.25 to sign a petition for a constitutional amendment that looks to ban legally owned semi-automatic firearms in Florida. And this amendment has been proposed for the state's 2020 ballot. They're buying signatures. I'm not really sure, but I think that's actually illegal. But the gun grabbers are definitely out there. They don't want you to have the means to defend yourself against the criminals or the government. But I repeat myself. That's what it's real. And again, there was that Department of Justice report. Gun laws do not reduce crime because the criminals get their guns through illegal means. Okay, Google has removed its audience research app ScreenWise Meter from Apple's program for enterprise customers to test iOS apps internally after Apple yesterday revoked Facebook's certificate over a similar research app that violated the program's policies. And by the way, in revoking that certificate, it inadvertently shut down all of the iPhone apps, iOS apps at Facebook, which led to a great deal of controversy. Now, the Facebook chief operating officer, Sheryl Sandberg, is out there trying to do damage control and claiming that teenagers consented to this creepy app that snooped on their phones. And apparently the consent was basically these kids as young as 13 were being paid to supply data and have all their phone activity monitored. That is creepy. And if I were a parent, I would be very upset. All right, we've got some callers waiting on the line. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, yesterday when that guy called about how he's like the government's your friend,
yeah,
against fascism. And then that caller, 2 callers later, was like, the Jews are responsible. That was a setup. There was like a divide and conquer going on there.
They did feel like shills. They really did feel like, they were trying to get in here and junk up the show.
Yeah, the government's your friend. That's why it outsourced your jobs, bailed out Wall Street and the bankers and the little people to bill, arms terrorists, overthrows governments, death squads in El Salvador. I mean, yeah, but it's your friend. Yeah, definitely shills, man.
He was claiming the government is looking out for us because they're shutting down websites that have racist content. And first of all, I don't agree with censorship. I don't agree with racism. But, the racist websites have a First Amendment right to be racist, and I have a First Amendment right to say I think you're full of it.
Yep, and that's, hey, man, it's a freedom of speech. If you don't like it, turn the channel.
That's right. It's an absolute. It's an absolute. If there are any limits on freedom of speech, then it's not free speech, it's permitted speech.
Hey, Mike, where's Claire?
She's all of a sudden not feeling well and decided she couldn't do the 3rd hour.
I was just curious what her feelings were with that. I'm Catholic. I'm not like overly religious. I'm not really religious, but what's going on with New York and Virginia and just this.
Oh, she's incensed. She's absolutely incensed. She thinks it's terrible.
I mean, just Mike, as a human being, Mike, in Cambodia, didn't they kill everybody with glasses on? I mean, these people think like that. I mean,
yeah,
right? I mean,
and you've got the governor of Virginia out there openly admitting, they're looking to harvest the organs. We're gonna pop this baby out, cut them up, and sell it off and make lots of money.
It's a sickness, Mike. Mike, I look at us like the British. I said this before. The whole Western world is decadent. It's decadent and declining. And is this what we've come to? What's next? Soylent, green type of thing.
We seem to be heading into that. I mean, one of the uses that Planned Parenthood sells baby parts for, believe it or not, it's a little gross and disgusting, is companies that make flavorings for various food products. And apparently there's something in unborn babies that makes the process a little bit easier for them. Yeah, we're in that Soylent Green world already.
Just, I don't know. I mean, it's everything's bizarre. And Mike, I don't know if you saw. I'm going to switch gears to Russia. Did you see that not the stealth drone that was on the runway? It was called the Su-70 Ochotnik.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, if you look up Su-70 stealth drone, Russia, check the pictures out. It looks like a better version of the one that the Iranians or the Russians hacked and landed in Iran, but looks like it has a better engine on it, actually. So must be. I think they're testing the landing gear on it. So, but it must be a stealth combat drone. Looked pretty mean looking. Pretty nice looking kit, you know.
Okay,
but,
well,
like on that Su-27 versus the F-15.
Yes.
It looked close from the pictures, but was it really as close as the picture? Because, you know, they have the sensors in the F-15 that would say, and I don't know if there's two pilots on the F-15 plane to know how close they're coming. Because remember the flyover, the Donald Cook? That was close when the guy was, like, basically below the deck.
That was a very close flyover. I don't know how close the Sukhoi was to the F-15 because, you know, without knowing the focal length of the lens that was taking the picture, but it was obviously close enough where the F-15 pilot felt he had to veer off.
And the last words, I'll take the Su-27 over the F-15 because the Su-27 is a superior plane.
Oh, it's a newer aircraft. It's much more modern. And, you know, the U.S. is trying to basically keep the F-15s and F-16s in service until they can get the F-35 bugs worked out. So there have been a lot of upgrades to it, but they're still 70s vintage aircraft. They're not stealthy. You know, I mean, the F-15s right now, they're grounded about half the time because of all of the maintenance problems.
And, Mike, I don't know if I still have time left, but the F-35, remember the one of the designers for the F-16, the A-10 says the MiG-21 would destroy the F-35 because of the wings are too small because this plane was made as a multi-role fighter. It wasn't supposed to be a multi-role fighter. It wasn't supposed to have VTOL capabilities. So that had to make the center fuselage bigger, right?
Yes.
That makes it, you know, that's not really a great aircraft. It needs air support, really, right? I mean,
well, you know, they're trying to do too many things with this one platform instead of designing and building, you know, task-specific aircraft, which is where you get the best performance, whether it's an F-15, F-16. The A-10 is a good example of a task-specific aircraft that did a wonderful job. But yeah, the F-35, they tried to make it all things to all people, and basically they junked it up. It's too heavy. It's underpowered. It still can't fly in the rain or near thunderstorms. Now we're finding out the onboard cannon is inaccurate. The whiz-bang tech still doesn't work. And now they're saying it's only going to last about a quarter of expected lifetime.
And there's one of parts are made in every state. There's one part. I mean, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. It's the stupidest thing to design. Like for every state to get a piece of the action, but there was reports where the people were saying like they have to redo some of the parts to make them fit. You know, I mean, it's just it's just a money pit. That's what it is.
Yeah, that's
Mike.
exactly what it is. And that's how military contracts are handled. They're apportioned out to states whose senators and representatives will support the military-industrial complex. And you're absolutely right. There can be a major problem when fabrication is spread over such a wide area and nobody's keeping watch. There can be mistakes. And, you know, they get to final assembly and all of a sudden they're finding things really don't fit.
And remember, you said that movie, I saw the movie with Kelsey Grammer. It was more of a comedy, but it showed how the M1 Bradley fighting vehicle was changed, and they wanted to add a turret and this or that. And that shows you, even though it's a comedy, what it's like, what they want, you know? Hi, Mike.
Well,
have a good
It's based on a book. I mean, it was actually written by a guy who was involved in the development of the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, and the book was called The Pentagon Wars, and Richard Benjamin directed the movie. And if you haven't seen it, you should. And yes, it's a comedy, but it's a very good look at what goes on inside the military procurement process, because this stuff all happened that they depict in the movie. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And we're going to switch over to Art off the grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I was on the phone for part of your discussion there, so I missed a lot of it up until the point where you said something about, what was it? It sounded like the same video that I had listened to earlier with Dinesh D'Souza and some guy trying to challenge him that people on the left are more moral or something, and I'm like, are you serious? And that's what I thought about when you had made the comment.
Okay.
But, I was thinking two different things. Just a quick one on that, the whole thing with the abortions about keeping the baby comfy until organ harvesting. Somebody had asked me a couple days ago why they would do that, and I had to educate them about how, in order for the surgeons to harvest organs, the donor must be alive when the organ is removed, and they kind of like, what?
Yes.
So they're going to rescind their organ donor status. So people need to keep that in mind. That's why they want to be able to do this.
Yes.
Because they know there's a lot of money in this. But the main reason I called in was, it's amazing how if you just let the left go, they will at some point tell you the truth. And I was listening to a radio interview of what's her name, Alexandria or Ocasio-Cortez.
Yes.
And she starts out talking about people just don't seem to be able to make the connection how you could be poor and benefit from the color of your skin. Hint, hint. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll let your mind go wherever it wants to go with that one. It was also an opportunity for her to actually expose minority privilege, and she did that so well without actually calling it what it is.
Yeah.
But then she goes on and she gets into this gender privilege and how she can never relate to the anguish and the torment that these poor transgender or whatever gender they might happen to be, we can't possibly relate because we suffer or benefit from this gender privilege. So what? I'm privileged because I'm heterosexual? No, I think that means I am as my Creator made me. Now, if you want to call that being privileged, guilty, I guess. I don't know, Mike. What say you?
Well, all I can say is the Democrats now have their version of Sarah Palin. That's all I can really say about that. I mean, that really, first of all, this whole gender fluidity thing is complete nonsense. And I think, again, it's an attack on our identity to get us confused about who we are. But now to come on out and say that those of us who identify as male or female somehow enjoy a privilege, that's taking victimhood way, way too far, I think.
Well, we went from white privilege to any country that allows billionaires to exist must be immoral to cisgender privilege. I mean, there is no end to the level of stupidity to which these people will stoop. I mean, I just don't get it. Anyway, I had to share that. I didn't know if you'd heard about it. Like I said, I was on the phone for about a half hour there with my nephew long distance, so I missed about a half hour there, but I just wanted to share that. And, oh my God, is anybody else suffering from incurable migraines over this? Anyway, thanks, Mike. Have a great one, man.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to let you go here and switch over to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I don't know about an incurable migraine, but I don't let it get that far. This abortion up to birth. Wow. Talk about, a blatant disregard for life, human life, and they're harvesting the body parts and the blood. I mean, Ambrosia, is that the name of the place, that place that opened up that'll sell, they say 16-year-old blood, right?
Yeah.
On the website for $8,000 a liter.
Yeah, that's...
Two for 12?
Yeah. And, there's absolutely no medical backing for the claim. It's a fad. It's quackery.
Ridiculous.
It is really ridiculous. And my question is, what are they planning on doing with these organs harvested from these just born babies? I mean, they're going to be very small. Are they planning transplants into other just born babies of the wealthy? Or are they going to be used again for research the way Planned Parenthood does it? But again, you need to understand the people who are behind all of this thinking, they don't see unborn babies or just born babies as human beings. In fact, if you'll remember this story I found yesterday, where there was actually a student at Tennessee University advocating for abortion out to 2 years, saying that they're not really sentient until 2 years. Al, stay on the line. I'm going to come back to you after the commercial break. A similar proposed law in Virginia, which would allow for the killing of a baby after birth, if that's what the mother and the doctor agree should be done. And this may be a tempest in a teapot, simply because the more I think about it, I can't imagine a woman who wants an abortion not having one as early as possible. And I can't imagine a woman who's going to carry a baby for 9 months and deal with all the physical hardship that's going to entail, and then at the last minute say, I've changed my mind. So I don't know how many women are going to take advantage of this law, but it is an outrageous thing, and it does reveal much about the liberal Democrats' agenda. Al, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think at the end of that rainbow you just described is a paycheck.
Could very well be. Could very well be. We know that women will carry.
What is research?
Yeah, I mean, we know that there are surrogate mothers who, for a paycheck, will carry a child to term, and this may be a whole new business where they're going to literally have women. They're going to pay women to carry a baby to term, and then basically take it and kill it for the internal organs.
Yes. Look at Japan, and what they did, what they are doing with the whaling industry, even dolphins. I mean, everyone's seen the Cove by now, I would imagine. It's been out for like 11 or 12 years. And they did this under the flag of research, right? And they're poisoning their own citizens with mercury because, well, the toxins we put in, and it's not ending, like it's not stopping really, it's slowing down a little. It needs to stop.
Yes.
And this is the real problem of the modern world. It's not global warming. It's not all these social disorders. It's the simple fact that we've been pumping all this pollution into our waterways and ultimately out into the ocean for so long now. It's starting to come back and bite us in the rear end.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, at this point, because of the problems with Fukushima, Claire and I have stopped eating seafood. We don't know that we can trust the seafood taken out of our local waters.
Mike, that's your local waters. You can still buy in North America seafood that is actually labeled coming from Vietnam, like right off the coast.
Yes.
In that area. There are waterways, and oh my goodness. Mike, what are they doing with the cooling water now?
They're
How is
just
that
dumping
being
it in the
dealt with?
ocean. They've run out of room to keep it. The water treatment plant never worked. The ice wall didn't work. If you go to Google Earth and you look at the Fukushima power plant and you use that little time slider, you're going to be able to see how it's just piled up and piled up and piled up, and now they've got no place to put it. And so Japan has
And
just
it's still
started
melting
dumping it in
down.
the ocean. And the problem with that, of course, is it's going to contaminate the sea life there. And a fish that's contaminated off the coast of Fukushima is just as contaminated off the coast of Oahu or off the coast of San Diego. And that is the real problem. And researchers have gone into the Fukushima area and documented there are mutations taking place among the plant life. I don't know that anybody's gone to take a look at whether the sea life is mutating. It's the world's worst nuclear disaster. There's nothing they can do about it, so nobody talks about it anymore.
Exactly. It has seemed to have fallen off the radar. It's forgotten, but it's still ongoing. There
Yes.
is a nuclear meltdown ×3 happening right before our eyes, and we're not being informed about it. We're not told about it. Out of sight, out of mind. Things don't happen that way on this kind of global scale that we're talking about. And they're going on about this polar vortex, Mike, the northern jet stream, the Arctic jet stream, right?
Yeah.
It's a polar vortex. And it should be straight, That's what they were saying on the CBC. And all you got to do is look up what is a jet stream?
Actually, when you get close to the poles, the jet stream does warp around the pole because of Coriolis effect. Basically, they're using the phrase polar vortex. They're looking for an excuse why things are getting cold. At the same time, they continue to tell us that humans are warming the planet. And so that's where that polar...
Exactly.
But there's always been a polar vortex, and there's an Antarctic vortex. It is part of the weather systems up there.
Exactly. It's the northern jet streams.
Yes.
On either side, but they never mention, here's another thing, Mike, they never mention the simple fact that how far away the North Pole has gone now. True north.
You're talking about the magnetic
Earth,
pole. Yeah, it's really shifting around.
Yes.
Anyway, Al,
We're
got to take a
wobbling.
break for commercials. Sorry to let you go, but
Thanks,
we'll be
Mike.
back with
Thanks,
another
Mike.
phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here to Steve in Florida. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Well, I have a little bit of a problem with you and Dustin, complaining about Trump. I think you and I can both agree that our government has at least minimum 100 years of systemic corruption. All these sweet deals going back and forth and so forth.
Yes.
Now, so Dustin and you are upset that Trump hasn't resolved everything within 2 years. And I don't think it's fair. I don't like everything Trump has done, or whatever. But, even Jesus didn't have that kind of record.
Well, we're not going to equate Donald Trump with Jesus here, but my point of view is not that Trump didn't accomplish anything so much as the fact that he just dropped the ball and quit on so many of the things that he promised. First of all, he campaigned on getting us out of all these foreign interventions. He has not, and now we're getting ready to go into Venezuela. He campaigned on Hillary in prison. She's still not in prison. He campaigned on election integrity, and he disbanded the Election Integrity Commission, turned it over to the Department of Homeland Security.
Let me back up. Okay, you said, I think last week, he did nothing for the veterans. The veterans.
Okay.
And as far as I know, any veteran can get immediate care.
Well, that's not what I hear from people who are trying to get into the VA, certainly around here, that the wait times can be very, very long. We got a lot of homeless veterans here on this island. Nobody's taking care of them.
I mean, nobody knows for sure, like, what's fact and what's fiction. But, I mean, let's back up here. Who is going to reverse all these, like, go against Big Pharma? I mean, that alone, can you imagine how many enemies right then and there you get?
Yeah, I understand.
Congress.
We've become a corporatocracy, and we have a lot of oligarchs calling the shots around here, like, George
Not
Soros,
all.
obviously.
They're most.
But again, Trump wanted the job of commander-in-chief. He made a bunch of promises during the campaign. And yes, I know prior candidates have also made promises they did not keep. But we should not say it's acceptable for Trump not to keep his promises because we let Obama slide and we let Bush slide on on their unkept promises. And so,
Right.
Trump is a disappointment. And he's got 2 more years to try and get something going, but so far I'm not seeing him. In fact, if anything, it looks like he's just coasting through the job, and he's letting all these other people run the country for him. And maybe that's just something that he picked up from his time in business. We're going to delegate this hotel to you. We're going to delegate this casino to you. And I just get to sit back and look good on reality television. But that's not how you run a country. And I'm upset at the way Trump basically turned his back on the independent media. He hasn't really spoken out or taken any action regarding, the deplatforming by Google and Twitter and YouTube. That independent media played a major role in getting him into that Oval Office. And those people, they're not going to be there in 2020. They're not going to feel like, getting involved anymore.
Okay. Well, it seems to me that you all are, like, painting him as the worst president that we've ever had.
No, he's not the worst president that we've had, but he's not being a good president. He's not being good for the American people.
Bush, are you kidding?
He's not a good president for the American people, is what it comes down to. Okay? Anyway, Steve, thanks an awful lot for the phone call.
I'm sorry, okay.
We're going to let you go and switch over to Bass in Holland. Aloha, Bass. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I want to tell you I feel really, really safe in Holland. Yesterday we got our first F-35 Joint Strike Fighter.
Okay.
In a big ceremony. We ordered 37.
Doesn't it look good sitting on that runway?
And Israel got some. Well, at the moment we only have like 4 to 8 operational F-16s.
Yes.
To shoot down basically only passenger planes, no Russian planes or whatever. Sometimes they follow the Russian planes on the North Sea.
Yes.
But why I really feel safe is we get constantly bombarded by terror threats and whatever. But we only had 2 terror threats in the last 20 years. And the one before was the attack on Theo van Gogh, descendant of the painter. He was stepped down by a Moroccan, I believe. And we had a terror attack last year. There was a Syrian guy, he stabbed like 4 people at a train station. But
I remember
the guy,
that one.
like 20 years ago, Theo van Gogh erased. There was nothing on the tapes, so we just like erased the tapes. So I feel really safe that the government is trying really to prevent these kinds of things.
Well, you have an advantage in that, Holland doesn't really go around the world annoying people. And,
exactly.
I think of Holland, and I think of windmills and tulips, and very pleasant people. I'm surprised you've even had the 2 terrorist attacks, because why would somebody want to terrorize you? You guys are fun. So
we had some problems with Indonesia in the past.
Yeah.
We are still at war with North Korea. There's a truce, but we are still at war.
Yes.
And in the past, I would go to France, for example, in the 1990s, and I would arrive at Gare du Nord, from Holland. There would be a military everywhere with Uzis and heavy AK-47 spares.
Yes.
Because they have the past of messing with other countries.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's like nobody gets up one morning and just says, I think I'm going to be a terrorist today because there's nothing on TV. Usually terrorists are the result of a society that is being exploited and oppressed by an outside power. And they call it terrorism, but it's really asymmetrical warfare or unconventional warfare. I
think in Holland they especially use the terror thing to sponsor the budgets for the intelligence services,
yes,
Department of Justice. Sometimes they arrest one person at the train station, and it's not really necessary because the person was confused, and they arrest some more people to distract. Well, it's a big event. But what it comes down to, they want more money.
Yes.
To secure us, to give us a safe feeling. But when I talk to the people which actually do the work, they are like, we have too little money. We can really accomplish nothing. Like Earl in the Netherlands.
Yes.
Another caller from those. He worked for the services, and I think he can comment on how little budget they actually have to accomplish something. It's totally different from having actually a service accomplishing and preventing attacks. And the other story, well, we have terror threat, we have people returning from Syria or whatever. There's a discrepancy.
Yeah, that's going to be a problem. And of course, that guy who stabbed those people last year had come from Syria. And that's a problem all across Europe.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm always happy when there's a stabbing or whatever, and it's not some guy from Syria or whatever, one of our former colonies. And we have many in Holland. I feel really safe in Holland. And,
well, good.
It's nice to be here. So, yeah. I want to say goodbye, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to switch over to Paul in New Jersey. Aloha, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, concerning the late-term or actually post-birth abortion issue, I think they're just being honest about what's going on in the back rooms and some of the abortion clinics. And I think in the vast majority of these cases are going to be severely deformed infants. A lot of these children who are born, if you look up the cost of treatment of a malformed infant with hydrocephaly, and the average price is about $1 million.
Yeah, but the problem is those kind of deformities show up much, much earlier in the ultrasound, where you have an opportunity for an abortion where you're not dealing with the issue of whether this is a viable human being. And the New York law and the one they're proposing in Virginia, they're not confining it to cases of severe birth abnormality. It is at the mother's discretion.
Well, that I think could be a little over the top. But the reality is, it's a lot of money. And in the case of hydrocephaly, about 50% after being treated, and it costs $1 million, are going to have some form and degree of mental retardation. And that is going to be a long-term burden to the taxpayers. And through the health care costs, we're all subsidizing this. So, and my point is, I admit it, I'm selfish in my life. I want my taxes to be low.
Yes.
And what some other people do with their children that they don't want is not my business, because I'm not going to want to adopt their unwanted child. Understand this?
Yeah, but somebody else might. Somebody else might.
Right. Well, maybe they should put up a fund, and instead of going out to protest the abortion, why don't the pro-lifers put up money and say, we'll buy these children from you. We'll give you money for these children if and then they won't look like a bunch of hypocrites. But the way I see it is the pro-lifers, and especially when I hear the types of like a Rush Limbaugh talking about this, a guy who's been married 4 times, he could have already had a huge family of his own, but he chose not to because he's selfish and he just wants to keep his money, right? And he could fund these children, he could adopt these children, but they don't. And that's my problem.
Well, not yet, but I mean, you've brought up what is actually a very, very good idea, and I would not be surprised if we actually do see that start up in New York and potentially Virginia as well. I think the reason there is such an outrage over these laws is the fact that there are no restrictions to babies with severe birth abnormalities. It is simply at the discretion of the mother. It's a very shocking and callous situation. And again, those kind of severe birth abnormalities you're talking about are detectable at a much, much earlier stage in the gestation process, where the abortion, can take place at that point. But
in marginal families, they're not going to have the money for some of these medical tests. Some of these people might be migrants who just came over from Mexico. I saw.
Well, they're not supposed to be here anyway. And by the way, the illegal immigrants from Mexico are in fact being medically subsidized at taxpayer expense. You want your taxes to be low? There's an issue you should look at.
I'm with you on that one too. And the point is though, and this is in a sense, it's the natural extension of socialized medicine, because I resent having to chip in for these people who make these bad abortion choices and are going to give birth to a child I have to subsidize, right?
Yeah.
But likewise, but then if we went full capitalist, a lot of these people would want to voluntarily abort these damaged children because they'd have to pay for it all themselves. And I saw New York from ABC News last week. They did one of these puff pieces on a migrant from. She looked like she wasn't an American, but she was morbidly obese, and she had a child with severe deformities, where the intestines are outside the body when they're born.
Yeah.
And the child was going through all this hellish life of being kept alive to make ourselves feel good. And yet you could see the parents are obviously poor. The mother was obese, so she didn't even care about her own health, obviously, from the looks of it, when she had this child. And we are subsidizing this. And that's what I'm saying about this. And it's part of why I resent the pro-life movement. It's because I think the pro-life movement is unrealistic, and I think a lot of them are hypocritical. I think they claim to want to adopt these children, care about the unborn infants, but as soon as that child's born, they head out and let's be honest, they want to talk on talk shows. A lot of these people are men, and they're not going to be raising these children. And the hypocrisy of it is.
Let's back up here a little bit. I feel I need to put in a little bit of a word. There's a segment of our population which has been ignored by the feminist movement in general, and that's men who want to get married, who want to be fathers, and I was one of them. In fact, when I was very young, that's what I dreamed of doing, growing up to be a dad and having a family, and that's all I ever wanted out of life. And unfortunately, it didn't happen there. And that's one of the things that has formed my opinions about abortion. So you want your taxes to be low. You don't want to be paying for these severely damaged children, but you want other people to pay for them. You want the pro-lifers to pay for them. You want Rush Limbaugh to pay for them. It sounds to me like you're just kind of being greedy here. And I don't think being greedy is an adequate reason to say it's okay for post-birth abortions. Because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, and without getting into religion or the Bible or anything, they're going to see it as infanticide or murder. Anyway, got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this Pauhana Friday. We've got time for 2 more quick phone calls, and let's start with Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Listen, I'm my best to Claire.
Yes.
Have a good weekend. I wanted to just point out that do you remember the the big, you might want to talk to Paul, who just got off, who was from New Jersey. The big New Jersey scandal several years back when they discovered that mayors, rabbis, I think maybe the governor and the Mossad was involved in organ trafficking.
Yes.
And then it disappeared. So maybe they're heavily invested in this new thing where they can make money off these new source of organs.
Well, again, the problem is with a newborn baby, it's so small, unless they're transplanting to another newborn baby, I don't think that's really going to work. So I don't know what the whole point where the governor of Virginia said they're talking about organ harvesting, unless it's for, research purposes or other commercial application.
Boy, remember just a couple of years ago, Mike, there was a big thing about stem cell, and now there's this.
Yes.
My Lord. But it's true out there, everybody. Several years ago, there was a ring of organ smugglers that were made up of mayors in New Jersey and rabbis. And that's a fact. And
I remember that.
From the media.
I remember that.
Yep. But, Islam is a god of religion, though. Let's talk about them. Hey, listen, Mike, have a great weekend.
All right, same to you. Thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome back to the show. And I know you called on in because one of the other callers was talking about you. Your ears must have been burning.
Talk about Paul from New Jersey first.
Okay.
How much does a cruise missile cost? They spend more on repairing a cruise missile than taking care of I'm not a religious fanatic. I'm just like a Catholic. I'm not very overly, but I mean, if somebody has a medical issues when they're born, Mike, I'm living in New Jersey right now. It's cold outside. If a baby's outside that's deformed, you gonna just leave it outside? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wouldn't either. But, you raised a point here. Paul was trying to frame this totally in economic circumstances. He wants his taxes to go down. Well, why isn't he not out there campaigning against the war machine? Because that's where most of our tax money is going right now.
Yeah, I mean, we're all sentient human beings. They spend more on repairing metal and wires. I mean, there is babies born that have problems, and they call it, defect. But he said Rush Limbaugh, he's greedy, he has 4 wives. But I mean, then you turn around, you just says you're greedy, you don't want your tax money. I'd rather have my tax money going to help a child live than to fix like a piece of metal and wire a cruise missile. You know what I mean, Mike? Like the coups, the money. I mean, geez, I don't know, Paul. You got to rethink what you said.
I think Paul was clearly...
Can you hold me over, Mike? I want to talk about that other guy, too.
There's nothing to hold over. We're at the end of the show.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Call in again on Monday here.
All right, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And the show is just about over here. So, again, thanks for tuning on in. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's going to have lots of interesting things to share with you. And have yourselves a really good weekend. I know it's Super Bowl Sunday is coming on up here. Tomorrow we have the big launch of Tulsi Gabbard's presidential campaign in Honolulu. I still haven't decided if I'm going to do that one or not. Please share what you learn here with everybody else that you know. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. Have a good weekend. We'll be back on Monday. Aloha, America.